Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today's November 27th, 2022, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? So, today, first, I wanted to start with an article that came out about Lukashenko potentially nearing his end as the leader of Belarus. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is that the Russian military intelligence may be attempting in the coming days to pursue a scenario involving either the assassination on Lukashenko or its imitations, with the aim of ultimately intimidating him and prompting him to finally order his troops to directly engage in the war on Ukraine alongside Russian troops. Um, and if you guys haven't seen, I've made a video many months ago, back in end of June, discussing the potentiality of Belarus joining the war and attacking Ukraine from the north. And I gave that rating about 50-50. I wasn't really sure. Back at that time in June, Russia was sort of gaining a lot more ground than they are now, and they were sort of more on the winning side. That was before the Ukrainians got the HIMARS system. So I gave it 50-50 because it seemed like Belarus was giving indications that they would do it, but now it's pretty much over. I really think that with Lukashenko in power, he's not going to give the green light for his army to invade from Belarus, just mainly due to the fact that the element of surprise is gone. The Ukrainians, I've shown you the videos and the pictures, have been building a lot of reinforcements, a lot of defenses alongside the entire border between Belarus and Ukraine. And it's a suicide plan for Lukashenko because first, his army would be decimated from day one of crossing the border. Number two, it puts him in the category of war criminals, the same category as Putin. Right now, he can still kind of get away with it, saying that, oh, well, Putin was forcing my hand, but you see, I didn't invade Ukraine, I didn't do anything, I didn't have the choice. But as soon as he gives the order for his army to attack Ukraine, he gets put in The Hague right away once all of it is done. So he's not going to do it. I'm pretty certain that Lukashenko is not going to give the order. And I think that now Putin is getting tired of his, shenanigans of, yes, he's supporting Putin through, always saying that it's Ukraine's fault and we're not, at fault here. But he's not doing what Putin asked him to do, and it is to use his army to attack Ukraine from the north, distract the Ukrainian forces, and just wreak chaos in Ukraine, even if it's for one day or one week. For Putin, that is important because as long as you're a viable asset to Putin, he's going to keep you. But he's no longer a viable asset, Lukashenko, for Putin. So he's going to try to get rid of him. I'm certain of it. And plus, with the news that I think it was yesterday, 2 days ago, the foreign minister of Belarus somehow died. I didn't read the details, but I'm sure it's probably related with the Kremlin doing something, sending a signal to Lukashenko, telling him that if you don't do something, your end is near. And obviously, that's for the main reason. Once they manage to assassinate Lukashenko, if that happens, they're probably going to merge both armies together under single command and push from the north, most likely, towards Kiev again. So, in other news, this is an interesting article which I very much so agree with, which begs the question, when will the Ukraine military finally be able to retaliate for the ongoing destruction that is happening in Ukraine by striking back at targets inside Russia? And the short answer, as it's indicated here, is when Ukraine's partner will allow them to do so. And that's the weird part about it, is that the whole world is condemning Russia's actions at attacking Ukraine and the barbaric destruction and killing civilians, but all of them are protecting Russia from Ukrainian counterattacks ever since the invasion began February 24th. They always put, an asterisk with the weapons that they give to Ukraine that promise us that you will not use against Russia, against Russian military targets, Russian infrastructure that is being used to destroy Ukraine's infrastructure. And this sends the wrong message to other partners and allies. It's not only about Ukraine's defense and ability to protect itself and send a message to the Kremlin, but it's also, as it's indicated here, self-defense is a basic right for every nation and includes proportionate lawful retaliation. And here we're not talking about Ukraine striking back at all civilian targets in Russia. We're talking about military infrastructure, logistical lines, oil refineries that are being used for the Russian army to destroy Ukraine right now. And I think it's completely legitimate for Ukraine to target them and being allowed to to voice that on news outlets. Right now, I think it's still happening on a much smaller degree. But the Ukrainian forces have to sort of play this silent game of we don't know what happened, we're not aware of everything, and it kind of gives this reasonable doubt that well, it wasn't the Ukrainians, it probably was something that happened in Russia. And I think that at this point, with what we've seen of the capabilities of the Russian regime and what they're doing to Ukraine, I think it's completely legitimate for the Ukrainian forces to attack military targets within Russia. It doesn't matter where, but I think it's completely legitimate. Russians have had zero filter for that, and they've struck, the capital dozens of times throughout this war. And Ukraine at this point is just forced to shut up and do nothing about it, and isn't even allowed to, retaliate somehow at key critical infrastructure in Russia. So I think that's very important for partners of Ukraine to really change the narrative here and force themselves to agree that it's important to acknowledge that Ukraine has the right to strike Russia, and not civilian targets, but military targets. And these are some pictures and an article, not an article, but a post that says that mobilized Russian soldiers in one of the regions in Russia are suffering from mass outbreak of infectious disease, but the doctors are unable to treat them due to the lack of equipment and medicine. And this is likely the result of overcrowded and sanitary conditions at their training area. Well, here's some two pictures. You can see that this is some gymnasium, probably school gymnasium or probably like a military gymnasium, doesn't matter. But they don't even have enough barracks for them to properly be lodged. So they put them in these, very small gymnasiums with probably 100 soldiers in there. And, it's the time of the year, November, December. There's a lot of diseases that are being spread around, flus, and obviously COVID is still around and things like that. So the fact it's just a dangerous cocktail, right? You have soldiers that are not well fed, poorly equipped. They're probably training in very cold areas, so they come back and they don't have the energy to recover, and their immune systems are like this. And so you can see that it's the recipe for disaster. And so now this winter is going to be disastrous for the Russian army, and especially the mobilized soldiers that don't have the equipment they need will not be getting the support that they need from the Russian military in terms of food, weaponry, and just proper living conditions. And so there will be so many deaths, unfortunately. And we're going to be probably, these like daily reports by the Ukrainian military of the deaths and destruction of military assets of the Russian army. Instead of seeing about, like 400 or 800 per day, it'll probably be in the thousands now. And thus why I think I've mentioned in my previous video that the Russian regime is contemplating another wave of mobilization in January, February to counterbalance these losses that they're going to get in December, which are going to be astronomical. And Germany, thank you to Germany because they're transferring 10 M1070 Oshkosh tank tractors and 57 armored vehicles that are currently being used by the German border guards. So they're sending them to Ukraine. And also interesting, I don't know what type of systems these are, but 14 remote controlled tracked vehicles to be sent to Ukraine. It's interesting to see what these remote control tracked vehicles are. They look like. They're probably some drone. If they're remote controlled, I assume there's some drone like vehicles. But again, as much as I criticized Germany in the beginning of the war, I think right now they're doing really great work. And thanks to the German people who supported Ukraine, I think Olaf Scholz realized that he needs to offer more support. And the Germans have been giving a lot of great weaponry to Ukraine with the PH-2000 Panzerhaubitze, with their RST systems. Now it's these Oshkosh tank tractors along other vehicles that they're providing to Ukraine. I think that the Germans have really shown great support right now. So huge thank you to the Germans for that. And in terms of the map, again, not many things are going on today. The last couple of days have been very quiet. But the only report I am going to discuss today is the fact that the Russians tried to gather here in Pilhorodne, which is right off of Bakhmut. And there is a video, drone video of basically an artillery attack by the Ukrainian forces at night, where they saw a huge grouping of Russians around this intersection, not too far away from northeast of Bakhmut. And there were about 20 to 30 of them here. And that artillery pretty much decimated the entire grouping of the Russian soldiers that probably tried to do an attack from the north of Bakhmut. And yeah, it's brutal, brutal warfare right now up in Bakhmut, but the Russians are incapable of breaching the Ukrainian defenses. And let's give a huge shout out to all the forces that are fighting day and night to protect Bakhmut. It's a massive, important bastion for the Ukrainian army, and the Russians are doing it all to take it, and they're struggling. And that's the only news I have, is that the Russians had a failed attack here last night, and many more to come. But apart from that, there's another news as well back in Zaporizhia, that potentially the Russians are planning to withdraw from Enerhodar, the nuclear power plant that is right off Enerhodar. Again, it's unconfirmed. We'll see if that happens, but it's a huge asset for the Russians. To just leave it would mean, also abandoning to a certain extent the northern front of Zaporizhia. It's kind of a big chip that they have that they can blackmail the world with, is that they have control of this nuclear power plant. So it's yet to be confirmed, but great news if the next few weeks that will happen, because we know that the Russians have been doing a lot of blackmailing with this nuclear power plant. Mining it, to storing a lot of military assets here, to shelling themselves this nuclear power plant, to using the power plant to shell cities on the right bank of the Dnipro River. So it'll be interesting to see. But apart from that, the front is very quiet so far. So let's get to some videos. Just two videos today. First of all, Kherson Oblast, there's still a lot of work to do. The Russians have mined a lot of civilian buildings. You can see here, one of the soldiers is showing one of the trip lines that if somebody was to walk on, would activate a mine, right? So there's a lot of work yet to do to demine a lot of areas in Kherson. Unfortunately, the Russians are committing war crimes every day, but this is one of them, and this is probably some sort of a civilian house or building. Either way, there's a lot of work for the sappers. And last video, more joyous note, Chef Zhenya, the chef I indicated a couple of videos ago that is cooking food for the Ukrainian forces. You can see that he's somewhere in Kiev feeding the National Guard of Ukraine. And, in my opinion, he's a hero. He's doing God's work. Looks like mashed potatoes here. But you can see the difference between the Russian soldiers, how they're being fed, and how so many volunteers in Ukraine are providing great food for the soldiers. It's a huge important factor, is food. Let's not discount that. That's super important. And the fact that these soldiers can, after their training, come back to warm food, quality food as well, is really important. So you can see it's a huge operation, like they have massive pots, and the soldiers are super grateful. You can see they're eating with much happiness. So the helpers, Chef Zhenya is here, really great work. And you can see that the morale is really good. They're listening to YMCA, so yeah. And the food looks really good, like the portions are quite good, have oatmeal, boiled eggs, some good sandwiches, some soup with barley. Very typical Ukrainian food, high caloric, high density energy food, which the Ukrainians love. Borscht, vareniki, pyroги, things like that. It's really the Ukrainian traditional food. This looks kind of like borscht, or perhaps some warm, like tomato soup. I don't know. But overall, it's really good to see that the Ukrainian soldiers are being mostly well fed, and that's really important. So that's it, guys. A huge thank you for your support. Again, please, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so. Leave me a comment about what you think in terms of the Lukashenko comment about, is he going to be deposed soon? Let me know. And I look forward to making a video in the next couple of days for you guys. Thank you.